CGIAR representative on the steering committee of the CCAFS endeavour. It's normally, and I've been asked to chair this morning's session, and it's normally incumbent upon the chair to provide some welcoming remarks. However, as you'll notice from your programme, you're going to get 4 sets of welcoming remarks from a very august body of people. So I am going to spare you further welcome remarks other than to say welcome. And with that, I would like first of all to draw on and call Dennis Garrity, our host for this meeting today and for the meeting that will follow in the next few days, to make a few comments in his normal, svelte, august and compelling way.
Watch out, Steve. Well, thanks so much, Steve, and good morning and a warm welcome to you all to the Science Park of the World Agroforestry Center, where we host over a dozen international institutions, programs, and welcome to Nairobi, a metropolis that's rapidly regaining its reputation as the warm city in the sun. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of time to enjoy that on the roads because the traffic gridlock gets worse every day. So do enjoy the green while you're trying to get back and forth from the meeting locations. Well, first I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Achim Steiner, Executive Director of UNEP and co-founder of the Nairobi Forum of Science and Policy for Sustainable Agroecosystems. Achim, we are grateful to have you with us with your passion for UNEP's global leadership in developing the convening power to make a difference, and your leadership with the CGIAR and other global research institutions in climate change as a sound basis for reaching and implementing a global agreement on tackling the enormous challenges that lay ahead of us. Welcome also to Leemans, Chair of the Earth Systems Science Partnership Scientific Committee, and also to Thomas Rosswall. Thomas, back again to the campus as chair of the steering committee of the CGIAR Climate Change Program. It's great to see you again, Thomas. And Carlos Sere, my friend from across town at ILRI, and I understand, Carlos, you are representing the consortium board of the CGIAR this morning. Finally, I want to give a special thanks to Bruce Campbell, Bruce and the CCAFS team for organizing this event and, of course, for choosing this venue here in Nairobi as its locus. We're honored to be able to host you. Today's event, in fact, reminds me of a bit of history. The history of collective action on research on climate change in the CGIAR. The first significant effort to bring together the entire expertise of the Centers on Climate Change was the Inter-Center Working Group on Climate Change, which was formed at the end of the previous millennium to bring together the key scientists across all 15 centers to develop common platforms and collaborative action as a community of scientists. And in fact, I see a few members of the Inter-Center Working Group here with us this morning. You were the forerunners. You were the ones who developed the collective action approach to climate change research across the system, and you deserve a sharp salute for your efforts. Many others of you here today were also gathered right here at the center back in May of 2003 for the first Climate Change Challenge Program proposal development. Remember that one? It was a heroic but ill-fated effort. It just missed the cut by the Science Council that time, and it languished in the wilderness for several more years. But the Inter-Center Working Group continued to meet and work together during those years until the political winds suddenly shifted and re-intensified, and there developed a massive new political interest in creating a CGIAR challenge program on the topic. That initial mad rush turned into a 4-year ordeal that has finally resulted in the dawn of GCAFS. But the Inter-Center Working Group was disbanded in the rush to develop another climate change document I know, however, that the scientists in the working group continue to meet, interact, and collaborate while the slow, grinding process of proposal writing and review ground on. No one imagined it would take so long, but it has finally reached fruition in the launch of CCAFS Challenge program, and now in the advent of the mega program on climate change and agriculture. As I received the recent documentation for the mega program development, I noted that you boldly conceive that these efforts will be a uniquely innovative and transformative research program that results in options and strategies for tackling food insecurity in the face of climate change, and will be recognized as the foremost global source of this information. That is a right and proper vision, and I know it can be done. If we put together the scientific clout and creativity in this room, and it receives the support and nourishment that it demands. In fact, as I look out over this incredible gathering of brain power and expertise, and some of the empty seats of people who will be arriving when the traffic clears, I'm reminded of the words of John F. Kennedy when he hosted a dinner for the high and mighty of the National Academy of Sciences one evening. And he said, "This is probably the greatest concentration of brain power that has ever graced the White House, at least since Thomas Jefferson dined alone." In fact, as I look out at this incredible gathering of brain power and experience, I guess that the statement reminds us that not only is it collective action that is the genius, but the genius of bold thinking individuals that will change the world as well and lead us to solutions to the terrible possibilities in the Earth's climate system that lurk around the corner. Terrible changes can come gradually or violently, and from many unforeseen sources. That realization came home to me last night when I saw a film about the supervolcano Anak Krakatoa that is now sleeping in the Straits of Java. Anak Krakatoa has had several horrific explosions during its recorded history, most notably in 553 AD and in the late 19th century. Its next blow-up could come at any time in the coming centuries, directly killing millions and covering the entire globe in a thick cloud of ash that would persist for 3 years or so, decreasing global insulation enormously, reducing average global temperatures by 10 degrees C, and wiping out virtually all food production for several years. That's pretty ominous, although it does help Akim to meet his climate change emissions reductions objectives in the process. But clearly, an explosion of Anak Krakatoa would make the inconvenience of the recent Icelandic volcanic events seem as nothing but a tiny blip on the screen. Well, we cannot prevent a Krakatoa, but we know that we can do a great deal to attenuate current greenhouse warming by attending to how we nurture the skin of planet Earth, or Gaia. The way that we practice agriculture can help to repair and to regreen the skin of Gaia. We can forestall the destruction of our land and our soils, and we can create an evergreen agriculture that integrates trees more ubiquitously into agricultural systems. In fact, a recent study of global tree cover by the World Agroforestry Center found that almost half of the world's 2 billion hectares of agricultural land already has 10% tree cover. And we know also that tree cover is steadily increasing on farmlands in many countries. We also know that this can be done on a greater extent in ways that enhance the lives and landscapes of billions of the poorest rural and urban people. In summary, this uniquely innovative and transformative research program ought to be the spearhead of these efforts. And I, for one, have no doubt that ultimately it will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis, for some very thoughtful perspectives as we open today. I'd now like to call on Carlos Sere, who is speaking on behalf of Carlos Perez de Castilla, the new chair of the consortium board.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a great pleasure to join you here for this important meeting. I won't be talking about greenhouse gas emissions from livestock. I'm going to be talking very briefly to you, read out a message from the consortium board chair, Carlos Pérez del Castillo. I thought I'd say just 2 or 3 words before that to brief some of you who are not so close with the CGIAR about the change, the reform process in the CGIAR, which has been occupying the CG centers for quite a while. In 2008, December 2008, a reform process leading to creating a new consortium with a legal entity which would directly engage with a fund managed by a funders council. This would be basically bringing all the funding in one organization and all the implementation in another, and having these 2 parts engage in contracts to achieve this bundling of the capacities of the center. Very much this topic we have today is one which absolutely requires that. So this process has advanced. We have created a constitution. We have now identified a consortium board led by Carlos Pérez del Castillo with 9 members. And we have just voted the different centers to join this consortium. So I think because of the board timing of different centers, 14 of the 15 centers have already agreed. So the consortium now has a constitution, has a chair, and has sort of the support, official support of 14 of the 15 centers. So I just wanted to give you that as a background because I think it's extremely relevant for the challenges we're facing here. The issue really is collective action. So let me briefly read Carlos Pérez del Castillo's message. I would like to express my regrets for not being able to personally participate in this important meeting. I'm very grateful to the Director General of ILRI, Carlos Sere, for accepting to represent the consortium board on this occasion. As you may know, the CGIAR is placing a great deal of emphasis on understanding the links among climate change, agriculture, and food security as part of its own reform process. The consortium of the CGIAR centers is now formally established as part of the new reformed CGIAR. The board of the consortium recognizes that great coordination is needed for the centers and their partners to, first, produce robust results and viable options for farmers to adapt to and mitigate to climate change, and second, to increase awareness of the role of agriculture in addressing climate change. The consortium board thus asked both the chair and the director of the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Challenge Program to work with the centers and their partners, including naturally the Earth System Science Partnership, to produce a collaborative proposal for an integrated research for development program, a mega program in the CG jargon, on climate change and agriculture. Furthermore, the consortium board decided that this proposal should be fast-tracked within the CGIAR system. This means that it is one of the 3 priority areas where the consortium board and donors expect a convincing proposal for funding for implementation to start in November 2010. The chair of the consortium board was pleased that the leadership of the challenge program agreed to this integrated approach, which is very much in the spirit of the reform of the CGIAR system. He was also appreciative that they agreed to take on the responsibility to lead the development of the proposal for this mega program. Let me address some important questions which are very relevant to the reform process. Why is it important to fast-track a proposal on climate change and agriculture? This is a global and very urgent issue. Climate change promises serious negative impacts on agricultural systems in the developing countries. Climate change threatens agriculture, yet it also brings an opportunity, one that the world cannot afford to miss. The consortium supports the role of research as a broker to bring about evidence-based policies to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. What does the system expect from a mega program on climate change and agriculture? A program that builds on ongoing research of partners and centers and adds value. It will add value by being a coordinated research for development action effort. It will diagnose and analyze the directions and potential impacts of climate change for agriculture and identify and develop adaptation and mitigation options for agriculture, food, livestock, fisheries, and environmental systems. I believe that this consultation will be extremely important because by bringing together a large number of committed stakeholders, it will provide direct inputs to the development of the full proposal. The Climate Change and Agriculture Mega Program proposal will be submitted to the Consortium Board at their meeting in May 2010 for approval. Once approved, it will be forwarded to the CGIAR Fund Council for decision on funding. Implementation could start as early as November 2010. I wish you success in your deliberations and will pay great attention to its outcome. Carlos Pérez del Castillo, Chair of the Consortium Board of CGIAR Centers. This is his message. I would just like to stress that we had a very big event recently in Montpellier, the GCARD conference. I think the major message out of that conference was that the global agricultural system, research and development system, is a fractured system. The challenge is there's all good pieces there, but the challenge we have all ahead is to bring all of this together. I think this mega program exactly represents that challenge, and I think if we get it right here, this would probably help us also with a number of other mega programs. Overall, these mega programs are trying to be much more integrative, cross-cutting programs, recognizing that many of the problems we're facing can't just be addressed with reductionist science. We really are dealing with complex systems, we're dealing with stewardship of systems, and this requires a completely new way of doing science beyond sort of a broader diversity of stakeholders, both science and development partners. So I would like to finish here, thanking you all for joining us in this effort, and I really look forward to today's deliberation and the work over the coming days with a subset of you to really submit a powerful proposal to the consortium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and please pass on our thanks to Carlos Pérez de Castillo for his words. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard mention a couple of times of the Earth Systems Science Partnership. The next set of remarks come from Professor Rick Leemans from the University of Wageningen, who represents ESSP. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I'm sure that within the next 10 minutes you will be much more familiar with it. And I think one of the really exciting parts of both the discussions today and the thinking that's gone into the climate change program as it currently stands and as it's evolving is that partnership between the Earth System Science community and the agricultural research community, and that is a major strength of the initiative that we have before us. Rick.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here because now it's after 5-6 years before the first planning of the whole CCAFS program started. The planning started from the CG system, from the Earth System Science Partnership, very much by a planning group, putting the proposal together for the challenge program. And I'm very pleased that the whole work ended up in the challenge program, and now the transition to these mega programs really make it much bigger, much stronger, and really involve all the different institutes.
General of the
Unfortunately, maybe the role of the ESSP becomes a little bit less, and we really have to strengthen that. But I think with Bruce's efforts, Thomas' efforts over the last year of implementing the program, getting the people together, there's an enormous potential for a great collaboration. What I'll do in the next 10 minutes, because most of you probably are not familiar with the Earth System Science Partnership, which is a partnership of the 4 international global change programs, the World Climate Research Program, the International Geosphere Biosphere Program, Diversitas, and the International Human Dimension Program, just to give a little bit a flavor of what these programs are doing. And the missions of these programs is very much an integrated study of the Earth system, trying to understand the drivers of global change, but also the consequences of global change in an integrated way, and focusing very much on how to actually move towards sustainability. But the Earth System Science Partnership is not a series of institutes. It's a network. We only employ about 50, 60 people worldwide in the different project offices, in the different program officers. But we reach out to many, many researchers, thousands of them, in research institutes, in universities, and as such have an enormous potential for doing innovative, state-of-the-art research. And if you look at the structure of the program, it's out of 4 different programs with their sub-project structures, and they have joint projects on carbon, on water, food, health, and a series of integrated regional projects. Now, the food project, CCAFS, really was instrumental to develop the challenge program with John Ingram in the lead. And the 4 global change programs really have been instrumental in setting up the different assessments, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. A lot of scientists have contributed in that. And of course, we have a very strong capacity building part through START with a series of fellowships of developing country fellows who work and collaborate with senior scholars in different institutes in different parts of the world. And we try to do an outreach to the different conventions, to different organizations, and finally, we really try to build that integrative science, bringing the understanding of the Earth system together, very much from an academic, scientific point of view. We also have just started our own journal, not so much a journal to publish innovative results, but really to synthesize the material. And in that journal, we also publish the different strategic papers. And I really hope that the CCAFS program will fill several issues of this journal in the future to come. Not only on the strategic plans, but also on really the substance of the research. But the Global Earth System Science Partnership is much more. Here a map compiled by Joe Elcamo and his group, who is leading the water joint project, who is now the chief scientist of UNEP, really developing a series of databases on the world dams. And of course, there's collaboration already within the CGIAR system, with IMI, to get some of the data. These data sets are really big resources because of the harmonization, etc. We have the Joint Carbon Project, which annually updates the global carbon budget, the emissions, the concentration in the atmosphere, and you really see that the emissions are still increasing. They're higher than the IPCC scenarios, but still within the uncertainty range within the IPCC scenarios. Fortunately, the emissions have gone down over the last year, mainly because of very good policy, financial policy, the financial crisis. So really that's following these kind of emissions. And the Joint Carbon Project is focusing now much more on regional emissions, sectoral emissions, and there's a very strong link then with this mega program. And also the update on the different concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere with the other substances really provides the information to the Copenhagen Accords and things like that. And of course, it's very important when you have this kind of information, not only to publish that in scientific papers, but also in websites, press releases. And here you see the outcome of one of the papers of the Joint Carbon Project, picked up by the BBC and many other newspapers, but also together with SCOPE, with UNESCO, really putting that into policy briefs of 4 or 5 pages, highlighting the main different issues. The whole Earth System Science Partnership, and unfortunately we don't have a single brand on logos. There's a plethora on logos within the Earth System Science Partnership of all the different institutes that collaborate, of all the different projects that collaborate. But we have been instrumental in developing the new IPCC scenarios, linking the climate models, linking the emission models, linking land use models, and really developing a whole set of representative concentration pathways, as they called are at the moment, which is more or less a lookup table for different impacts of climate change, bringing together the impact community, the climate community, and the socio-economic community. And I think this is really a big asset. So if you look at the Earth System Science Partnership with the Challenge Program, with the new mega program, really I think there's an enormous amount of advantages and synergies. First of all, of course, the link to the climate scenarios. And most of these scenarios you can download, but it's actually the expertise, how to use them, how to address the extreme events, etc. It's also the link to the whole discussion with the WMO on the climate services and the establishment of the national organizations. That's very strongly facilitated by the World Climate Research Program. The links with the land and water research, the link with the biochemical research, where you really get the state-of-the-art part. And of course, the human dimensions on governance, participatory approaches. We can learn very much from each other. And I think the whole mega program really should engage with the other scientific communities, and through the collaboration with the ESSP, we definitely can do that. And finally, that also will lead to additional funding, because the Earth System Science community is very strongly linked to the funding agencies, national funding agencies, etc., and can discuss that. So with that, I stop. If you want to know more, please don't hesitate to contact us and to learn more about the Earth System Science Partnership. Thank you.
Rick, for those of you who didn't have a feel for the ESSP, I'm sure that now you have got at least a sense of the nature of the beast, and I'm sure Rick will be happy to answer any further questions that you might have over coffee and otherwise. We now turn to Thomas Rosswall. Thomas is the chair of the CCAFS steering committee, and it's his job to begin to frame what we would like to get out of the rest of today, and also to orientate everybody further to the endeavour that you see before you. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yes, I will try to do that briefly before we get into the meat of today's presentations and session. Let me just start to stress one thing that was pointed out in the previous comments, but I'd like to underline it, and it's a citation for FAO, that climate change will really affect the poor farmers, the fishermen, and the people living on the natural resource basis more than any other sector of society. We're talking about extremely vulnerable communities in many instances. And they face immediate threats, and we need to work with those that are affected to try to find solutions. We know that we currently have about 1 billion people that go to bed hungry. And we know that we've got a challenge to increase food production with increasing population, with the changes in consumption patterns, etc., on top of which we've got climate changes that will affect the consumption the production basis. In the planning for CCAFS, and the reason why CGIAR and ESSP joined hands in this was a realization that development and global change are very closely interlinked. But in the past, there has been very little interaction. Two, in principle, different science communities with different ways of operating, funded from different sources. There has been a discussion about how to bring this further for many years in many contexts, with the development community focusing on the rural poor and the local level, and the global change community, of course, focusing at the global level. How can the global and the regional, how can the global and the local connect? And this is a slide that I'll be using a number of times. It was from a meeting that we organized 5 years ago now. But I think that we want to see a true change in the way we do research. If we're going to address the question of climate change, agriculture, and food security, we need to, within a holistic context, link the local to the global. And that's no easy task. That will mean that we change the way we do business. And CCAFS, as it has been planned, has tried to outline ways of doing that. And as you already know, there are two major partners with a strong tradition in the CGIAR, working with the rural poor and sustainable development issues. And as Rick just explained, a tremendous resource of scientific expertise at the global level. They got together a few years ago to start to plan what became the challenge program on climate change, agriculture, and food security. There is a science plan that was published, that was developed by an integrated approach of the two groups of scientists over a couple of years, that was reviewed within the CGIAR system and approved, that was reviewed in the ESSP system and approved. And we really developed the partnerships that are necessary to move the agenda forward. On the CCAFS website, there is also the medium-term plan that has been developed with much more specific objectives for the period 2010 and 2012. And initially, this meeting was organized to have one of the opportunities to interact with various stakeholders in a truly participatory approach to doing the science. But as we heard from Kalle Sere and also Dennis Garrity, the CGIAR system is changing. And this now presents an even greater opportunity for the two communities of scientists to move ahead to address the question of food security in a changing global environment. In preparation for the climate discussions in Copenhagen, the Alliance of the CGIAR Centers developed a report, which is in your folders when you registered, on climate, agriculture, and food security, a strategy for change. We could do this very quickly, only because we've had such excellent collaboration among the 15 centers in preparing for CCAFS. There were contact points in each of the centers that could really take this on board and took the conceptual framework of the challenge program as a point of departure. But that's not all what the centers do of importance to climate change. The centers do much more than that. And there are some excellent examples in this report what the CGIAR does in relation to climate change and has done for many years. We also organized in Copenhagen a first Agriculture and Rural Development Day to bring all the stakeholders together to discuss this. And together with the Forest Day, which was the third, organized by CF4, ICRAF, and others, to have a side event at COP to impress on the policymakers that, of course, agriculture is part of the problem, where the agriculture, forestry sector is probably contributing about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. But it must also be part of the solution. That was the key message to the meeting in Copenhagen. But again, this could not have happened had the CGIAR and ESSP not developed the challenge program. There were many other partners that came on board. And we are now planning for the second event at the next COP meeting in Mexico in December of this year. I think it was Carlos Sere that, or Dennis, I can't remember, excuse me, someone referred to the meeting in Montpellier a month ago, the Global Conference on Agricultural Research for Development, which was organized by a number of organizations, but CGIAR prominent among those, to really continue this discussion and engagement with all the stakeholders. The science needs cannot be defined by the science community only. It has to be a participatory approach in setting the agenda and engagement so that we know that we address the problems that the farmers see, that the policymakers have to address. And you heard from the chair of the consortium board in Carlos Sere's presentation, and he was also cited in the conclusion of the G-Card conference, and I won't repeat that because in principle it's his words that Carlos Sere read. But again, it's the focus on the smallholder, poor farmers in the world that will be affected by climate change. So that is what we had planned for today, to reach out to the community in Nairobi and interact and listen to you. Have some very important presentations during the day. And over the next 3 days, some will stay on for a more intensive workshop mode to discuss this. But of course, with the CGIAR change process and the decision very recently that it will be fast-tracked what is called currently a mega program on climate change and agriculture, we wanted to use this opportunity to, on the basis of CCAFS, develop this further into a dialogue about the proposal that's fast-tracked. But let me say very clearly that this proposal, which is available in draft, and some people have worked very, very hard to develop it over a very short period of time. And again, it could not have been done had we not had the contact points in all the centers, has to be submitted on the 10th of May. That is around the corner. That's on Monday. But we, all the same, wanted to use this to get your additional insights and inputs and suggestions for how CCAFS can be developed into a mega program that encompasses more of the central work of the centers without losing the absolutely crucial partnership of the Earth System Science Partnership. And I hope it's been clear from what Rick Leemans said that this is a crucial part, and I also refer to it with regard to link the global to the local. So we hope today will provide the presentations to spark discussions and interaction among all the participants and get your additional perspectives on climate change and food security. The planning workshop over the next 3 days will also address CCAFS. The challenge program is still there. We've got funding. We need to get on with the business of producing the expected results. And it's going to focus initially on 3 regions, East Africa, West Africa, and the Indo-Gangetic Plain. And we want to engage the participants in looking at those regions and how we can bring it forward in that context, while also remembering that we are aiming for a more ambitious mega program. We need to discuss the impact pathways and how we can engage the stakeholders in a participatory fashion and see what are the gaps in knowledge where the scientific community can assist in filling those. CCAFS will continue its implementation until such a time that the consortium board decides to launch a mega program when CCAFS will be folded into the mega program. But there is no conflict here at all, because the proposal for a mega program takes as a point of departure CCAFS and expands with the help of all the expertise in the centers into a larger and even more ambitious effort. So that's why we need you here, and that's why we need interacting with you. And on behalf of CCAFS, I would like to welcome all of you. And on behalf of CCAFS, I would also like to thank Dennis Garrity and Carlos Sere. We are hosted at ICRAF today. We were planning to be hosted the next 3 days at ILRI because it's already been referred to. The traffic situation in Nairobi is not getting better. So we are not being hosted at ILRI. But ILRI has been extremely helpful in organizing this. So thank you to Dennis and to Carlos and all your staff for the help that you have provided to the CCAFS staff. And have an exciting and inspiring and good discussion day. Thank you.